Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started on Chapter 6, which has to do all with polynomials. So specifically identifying polynomials, adding or subtracting them, multiplying, dividing, and then eventually factoring. Factoring is something that is really used a lot in Algebra 2, and so it's a strong thing that you need to develop in Algebra 1. So let's get into 6.1, which is naming polynomials and then adding or subtracting them. So polynomial is a set of terms that contains constants and variables. A number that's by itself is called a constant, and a number attached to a variable is called a coefficient. We already knew this from combining like terms. A constant, something all by itself, no variable on it, no letter, and a coefficient. For example, if it was 3x, 3 would be our coefficient, x would be our variable. So when we get into classifying polynomials, there's two different ways that we're going to classify them. The first is by the number of terms, and the second is by the degree. The degree is found by finding the highest exponent in the term. And by the number of terms, I mean how many pieces are being added or subtracted. It's really important that we have a standardized system for identifying polynomials so that mathematicians can talk amongst each other and know exactly what we're talking about. So the first thing we do is identify by the number of terms. Before I talk about how we call these types of terms, or what we call these different types, I want to say something to start. You need to combine like terms before you get started and start identifying the number of terms. So if there's one term all by itself, let's say 3x. 3x counts as a term. There's not adding or subtraction of anything else going on. Therefore, 3x would be a monomial. Two terms, x plus 3, two things being added together gives me a binomial. 3 is a trinomial, and 4 to infinity, meaning anything bigger than 4. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way up to infinity. We just call that a polynomial. After 3, we stop giving them a specific name and talk about polynomials. When we look to begin identifying the degree of the polynomial, we're looking for the highest exponent out of all the terms that exist in that specific polynomial. So the first thing we do before we find the degree is again combine the like terms and then put them in order based on degree. So from highest to lowest exponent. This is another standardized thing mathematicians do to make it easier to communicate across a big group. So the first thing, if it's a degree 0, meaning the variable would have an exponent of 0. The exponent in that case causes the variable to disappear, and you're just left with a constant. Anything to the 0 power is 1, so that would be a constant, a straight line. Degree 1, x plus 3, or 2/3 x minus 6. That's a linear. We've already talked about this. That should sound a little familiar. You guys have been graphing linear functions. Anything degree 1. Degree 2 is a quadratic. 3 is a cubic. 4 is a quartic. 5 is a quintic. And anything 6 and up, we stop giving them specific names and we just say degree blank. So if it was x to the 8th power, I would say degree 8, polynomial, monomial, whatever I was looking at. Okay, now I'm going to look at a few of these examples. When I look at the first one, I'm going to look for two things. Remember, I need the degree and I need the number of terms. So my first thing, my degree, is my highest exponent. So not necessarily the first one, although I should put it in order, but the highest exponent. In this case, my highest exponent is a 4. Therefore, this is a degree 4. When I'm talking about terms, I mean the number of things being added together. So this right here, 2p to the 4th, is one term. P to the 3rd is another term. Two things being added together. That means I have two terms. So I'd go back to my list and I would note, oh, if it's degree 4, it's called a quartic. And if there are two terms, it's called a binomial. Therefore, if I was describing this particular polynomial, which collectively describes all of them, but I want to be a little more specific, I would say this is a quartic binomial. If I'm going to look at number 2, I notice that the degree in this case is 1. Remember, there's really a 1 exponent there, even if it's not written there. So it's a degree 1, and the number of terms is also 1. There's just one thing right here. Negative 10a is one term by itself. I'm not adding or subtracting anything to it. Therefore, this is a linear monomial. When I'm writing these, I write the degree first, whatever my degree description is, and then I write the number of term description after. I'm going to give you guys a chance to work on some of these examples on your own. Hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. Really, it's important that you remember and look back at these. Some of them are pretty common sense. Think about two. What other words? Two mean something. So binomial, bicycle, two wheels, trinomial, tricycle, monomial, monotheism, belief in one God, polytheism, belief in many gods. These ones might be a little more tricky, but it's really essential that you learn these so that you can effectively communicate with other mathematicians.